I'm Joanne, and I'm a senior editor at Architectural Record and a contributing editor to GreenSource. And I'm here with Rick Cook from Cook Plus Fox in New York. It's a firm that he founded in 2003, correct, with Robert Fox? And he's just been elevated to a fellow of the AIA. Congratulations, Rick. And he and his firm are perhaps best known for the Bank of America Tower, a LEED Platinum building in New York City. But he's going to talk about he's going to talk a bit about that, but also about some more recent, actually current projects. And so, Rick?
Hi, thank you, John. This is a shot of our roof in New York on the corner of 6th Avenue and 20th Street. And in a lot of ways, that's what I'm going to talk about. This is an experiment that at our office for what it's like to work in a green work environment and what does it mean and what can we possibly learn about connecting more with nature in the work environment. We've been doing more research into urban agriculture also, and urban agriculture has become a much more important part of what we're doing with our work. There's something miraculous that happens when people connect with the soil and they connect with nature that's unique. So this is out on our terrace also. They're planting the Three Sisters planting method, which is a planting method which was indigenous to the peoples of the Northeast. First what happens, they would transmit the story by narrative. So they tell the story about first planting in the mound the blonde sister, which is corn. And the blonde sister would go first. And then you'd plant the little green sister who depends on her older sister, which is pole beans. And the pole beans would then grow up around the corn. And then finally, the little sister who chases after the wind, which are squash, which would come out over the mound and shade the mound, retain the moisture. And we're finding more and more about the nitrogen balance that happens for a vegetation like this. And just recently, with the change of legislation in New York, we became urban beekeepers. So I'd like to talk about some of the projects we're doing, but in fact, this is about the work that we're doing. How people respond when they're connecting with nature, when they're connecting with the natural processes that happen.
Can I?
Sure.
We just decided that I would rudely interrupt. That's
Please.
how we'd organize this. But can you talk a little bit about the roof over not only the gardening, the urban agriculture part, but you also have a rather large area of intensive? I can never remember.
What you're looking at in this slide is actually a system called Green Packs that we developed with some friends. And what it is a mesh bag with a lightweight medium in it. Think pumice, lava rock, and then organic growing medium that came from Douglas Sturse McEnroe Farm. And then these are all sedum, they're succulents that don't require irrigation. And so it's a particular system called Green Packs that we developed.
And your office installed it, correct?
Yes, yeah. So 22 volunteers from our office actually installed it. And it might seem like a little thing, but it meant that it was their roof. It was something that they were watching and caring for, that they invested in. 22 people worked over a weekend, humping the bags up the service out of a truck, up the service elevator, and out onto the roof.
And how long has it been there?
This is our 4th or 5th year now. And then we also planted a tray system to experiment with the trays. And one of the lessons learned was we signed a lease that said if they ever want to replace the roof, we have to move the green roof. So the building was sold, the new landlord came in, and we actually had to move the roof. So thank God we had the Green Pack system, and every one of them had to be moved up to a higher roof. They re-roofed the whole roof, and then the whole green roof went back down on top of it again. Lessons learned in life. And then back here we had some trays, we had some vegetable gardens. This is just a conventional planted mound. And then our beekeeping. And really the point about this is, and what I was going to talk about today, is healthy workplace. And a lot of the green movement's been focused in on energy savings, and that is really important, carbon production, climate change, sea level rise. We've spoken about that a lot. But if you're talking to people who develop workplace, the big blue piece of the pie are people, their cost. people and their benefits, salaries and benefits. The little tiny red sliver is 0.8% of a company's expense. So if you do a LEED Platinum building, you will probably cut your energy cost in half, radically change the cost of energy. But if you look at it in the cost of running a company, it's actually a very, very small component of running a company. Absenteeism is about 2.5%. If you can impact absenteeism, then you will have a much greater impact than reducing the energy 50%. And I'm not saying that we don't want to do that, we must do that. It's just that how do you pay for the green things that we love, that we think make better spaces? How do you pay for it? It's in the cost of the people, the productivity, absenteeism of people, and also a concept called presenteeism, where people show up and don't get anything done. We are really thrilled to be working on a project on the High Line right now. I was asked to talk about the things we're working on right now. And so we're working on a project on the High Line, which is also just the most remarkable elevated linear park. If you haven't been there, I highly recommend getting up there. And we're doing a project. This is a quick sketch from 22nd Street. You're on 22nd Street. This is the High Line here. And we're trying to decide what kind of building would really engage with the High Line. So we're actually creating a second floor terrace with a kind of borrowed landscape from the High Line. Larger terraces that happen up in the building, and thinking out how do you make a building in this new type of urban space, how do you create a new urban work environment. And that's a quick rendering of where we are right now, 22nd Street, the High Line. Right now we're working on connecting with a stair that would bring you from the grade up onto the second floor. How do you make people connect with nature? Is it appropriate in New York? Typically we don't do operable windows in a green building in New York because the air has a high particulate concentration. We have a very humid atmosphere. But on this particular building, being low and on the High Line, I just can't imagine not doing operable vents. So we're trying to think through how to do natural ventilation in a green workplace in New York right now. And then this is a project, a competition that we're involved in. Also a kind of skyscraper on its side. It was over 500,000 square feet of workplace for a corporation. And what we know from having worked at 111 8th and consulting with Google on their workplace, there's a different kind of workplace than the one that we're used to in skyscrapers. So we designed a horizontal model, and you can see here, it's a courtyard model. How do you do an enormous floor plate, 120,000 square foot floor plate? We have a donut in the center of it, so it's actually basically two wings. And then this particular building had a parking component. So how do you make a reconstituted ground plane out of the parking piece? So the idea of the building is that once you're up and elevated in the workplace, you still have that near ground connection with nature. And I think that's all the images that I actually had prepared to talk about, so we can go through it quick and have plenty of time for questions.
But didn't you have one more of a terrapin?
Oh, and then, thank you. And then before the recession happened, we were extremely busy, and we were engaging with a friend of ours, Bill Browning, who was originally at Rocky Mountain Institute. And people were asking us to help them with their projects all around the world. And we were just way too busy to do that. And so we set up Bill to run what we call charrettes, bring in the best thinkers of whether it was water or air quality to work on those projects, do a report with their architects and their engineers, and then move on. And after that, we actually developed a company called Terrapin Bright Green. And we just issued this white paper, which is available on the Terrapin website, terrapinbrightgreen.com. Which is kind of the 101 about the economics of working with biophilic design in the world. So there's good data from the healthcare industry. It's generally called the Healing Garden movement right now. I don't think there's a major healthcare project being done now that's not following the principles of the Healing Garden movement. People feel better when they feel connected to nature. That's also translated in people heal better when they feel connected to nature. There's good data about how you treat people in recovery rooms, whether they have views of nature versus looking into a blank wall. The data is checked out as early as a day earlier. Students do better quantifiably on test scores when they're educated and tested in daylight work and teaching environments instead of artificial environments. And this is a very brief paper going over the basics of that.
And Are other architects clients of Terrapin?
Yes. in
So your
fact.
competitors,
Yeah,
potential
what
competitors?
what we decided we do is that Terrapin would do pretty much anything except for architecture. And architects have actually been some of our best clients. So if an architect is going after a large scale project and need the really good, high quality green thinking credentials, then they bring in Terrapin, and Terrapin associates with a whole series of partners to bring in a team to support the architects and engineers.
Can we go back to the slide right before this? Something that you were telling me when I looked over your slides, actually the slide right before that. So, but those two slides, they're this project. You can't tell us exactly where it is, but but it's clear, it's urban, it's likely North American. And when I looked over your slides, I was struck by the fact that all your current work, unlike many architects in New York, is all in North America, and that you haven't ventured into China or the Middle East. And you were just telling me that that's a very intentional strategy.
Yes, well, I started the firm that we have now in 1990, but in 2003, had the opportunity to become a partner with my mentor, Bob Fox. And at that point, we had the opportunity to decide how we wanted to work and what we wanted to do. And one of the things we decided was friendship was more important than the work, so that was easy. And the other one was we talked about whether we wanted to travel. And we made a commitment at that time to not do any work that we couldn't get to and get back from on mass transit in a day. That was like a guiding principle on the work that we take. And that was all pre-recession. We made one exception. We did a small project in Siem Reap, Cambodia. My sons are Khmer by birth. We're an adoptive family. And so we did a small visitor center at the Angkor Hospital for Children there, which was really fun. We did that pro bono, but otherwise all of our work has been New York centric. We had a large project in Boston, large project here in DC, but mostly in New York. And I was just listening to Stephen Hall talk about that the site being the physical and metaphysical foundation for all architecture. And it's nice to work in a place that you know and love and really understand. And up until the recession, we were blessed with more work than we knew what to do with in our own front yard.
You were also telling me a story about that, how that some of the work that you sought out because you felt like it was work that was socially important was ironically some of the work that went through.
Yeah.
And
when we made an agreement to only pursue a certain type of work, under the envelope of green or environmentally responsible work, the people who came to our firm for the studio cared about this work also. And what went with it very closely was social equity issues in the work. So we were doing big green skyscrapers for bankers. We're doing big green condo projects for people who can afford luxury condos in New York. And the studio came and said, Bob, Rick, we're working extremely hard providing these healthy workplace and living places for those who can afford it. What are we doing about the people who can't? And so we actually went out and interviewed affordable housing providers, supportive housing providers, to see who we'd want to work with. And there was a woman named Roseanne Haggerty who founded an organization called Common Ground. And she had found a way to break the HPD funding model by raising private funds for the green technologies. So we told Roseanne that we would love to work for her if she ever had a project that came up someday. And she gave us a call. And we were blessed with the opportunity to work on a supportive housing project in Brownsville, Brooklyn. And at the time, it was very small work for our studio, but people were very passionate about it, about bringing everything that we had learned to people on the edge, formerly homeless. And her mission statement was 2 words: end homelessness. And she followed that by saying providing a home for a homeless person doesn't end homeless. You need to attack the root causes. So people were really engaged in this work. We're very busy with larger scale work, and the irony of the whole situation is in 2008 when the recession hit, we were very developer based and the light switch went off. We had literally millions of square feet of work that just stopped, dead cold stopped. And the one project we went into working drawings and into construction at that time period was the Common Ground project in Brownsville, because it was funded by recovery bond money.
And so is it complete now?
It's just, they're just moving in, residents in 2 weeks. We just got our TCO. So it's something the office is really proud of, a very simple, very green supportive housing project in Brownsville on Hegeman Avenue.
And the project that you can't identify, though, that when you talked about a courtyard, it's like, and from this angle, it's an elevated courtyard. I mean,
Yeah.
it looks. Can you describe it a little bit? And
Sure.
you were telling me it's the huge floor plate.
What had happened, Terrapin had been consulting with Google after they purchased 111 8th. And we're looking at the way modern firms are working in a much more linear horizontal floor plate. If you look at Foster's plans for the Apple headquarters, it's the world's largest courtyard plan. It's just a giant donut. And there's efficiencies of working on a large-scale floor plate, but how do you do that and still give access to daylight? So this is a very, very large floor plate. It obviously spans over the street, but a donut is cut in the center to keep the daylight to the workplace within 35 feet.
And so it's not a courtyard that you can occupy.
Right.
But you get the benefits of the daylight.
Right. And actually the exterior space was the roof over the what in this case parking garage.
The roof at your office. What do you do with the vegetables? And
We divvy them up. So it's been a program to experiment with different planting methods, also with composting, and seeing, whether we generate more composting, whether we can use. Yes, we do. If you really compost diligently, you produce more than you can use in a small-scale urban garden. So some of the people were involved in spreading out to the wider composting movement in Brooklyn in the early days. But yeah, we divvy it up. They get left at the little back lunch table, and people split it up. We don't know what we're going to do with the honey yet. We haven't had our first harvest of honey yet.
When did you start?
This year, just started this year. For those of you who haven't done it, maybe some of you are beekeepers, but it's really amazing to watch the colony work and establish the order. They send out weather bees to check the weather early in the morning. I can tell when the weather gets over 50 degrees because the colony starts warming up, and the warmer it gets, the more active. So you can actually get a feel, just like looking at a green roof, you can tell the weather by whether the stalks are blowing in the wind or not. You can actually tell something about the weather by the way the colony is acting. The office put it right outside my window.
And it's employees that tend to the
Yes.
gardens and to the bees.
Yes.
Who do they bill those hours to?
To the office. They actually do it in the morning. They come in early to do it. People are pretty invested. It's the story with the green roof originally, too, that it really wasn't something like the office did, meaning we did. I did. It was something that they did, the office, that we communally did. And so the discussion about when the little bugs first came, and then the butterflies came, and then after that the birds came hunting the bugs, and then by the end of the second or third full season we had hawks hunting the small birds. So it's this idea that life follows life, and people would send emails around about something they had just seen, something new that they had seen on the roof. And really the whole point of all that wasn't to talk so much about our work environment. I think it was meant to talk about the work environments that we make, whether it's a laboratory or an office space, that we can really make an impact on people's lives by connecting them more with nature. That was really the point.
Do people in the audience have questions for Rick?
Where do you see the green movement going? I mean, we know that people are now persuaded. We know there's some slight increase in regulation in this country, but where do you see, where are the big ideas for the next 10 years?
There's two parts to your question. I think the green movement was really fun and new and newsworthy for a while, and we were all able to ride that wave for some time. And right now, even the energy codes that are coming in are quite demanding. So there's a general awareness. I think there's no question we're improving the quality of the buildings that we're doing from a performance point of view. I think in that category, lighting will be a big breakthrough. If you look at the cost of lighting and cooling lighting in a building, that'll be a big breakthrough. When LEDs have wholesale adoption, that'll be really good. So that's one component of it. Clearly, we think that the benefits are in the quality of space, the beauty, the poetics, and the quality of the space, in a new definition, how people connect with nature. We all have favorite places. You know, if you look at people's cubicles, the calendars they have are of some beautiful waterfall, usually from an elevated position, looking out over water or mountains prospect. So I think that in our work, we're much more interested in connecting people with nature, and of course we have to radically change the energy profile of buildings. So that's, and then the next thing is tied to that, which is getting buildings to operate like the natural system. So a good friend of ours, Eric Sanderson, who published a book called the Mannahatta Project, which really studies and quantifies Manhattan Island at 1609 at the point of first European contact. What he's done is really quantify what was happening on Manhattan, how was the water working, what were the indigenous species doing, and how did the ecology balance on the island of Manhattan in 1609. It's called the Mannahatta Project. And so, big picture, long term, what we're trying to do is do an ecological assessment of each site and see what that place did, and if there's any way to strive towards having a building do that. And it's getting closer to the Living Building Challenge is probably the standard that's closest to that, and we're doing a small project up in Riverside Drive pursuing the Living Building Challenge also, where you balance all of your water, you balance all the energy on site, you follow the concepts of biophilic design. Must be beautiful. So I think doing buildings that actually balance out again is the ultimate goal long term.
Any other questions? Okay.
Hi.
Hi.
I was wondering what the size of your firm was, and how did you guys come to formulate how big you want it to be?
Yeah. It's an interesting question. Because we wanted to do large-scale projects, that's what we know. It's a puzzle that I love to study, very, very large-scale, complex projects. We needed a firm of a certain size, and we had this benefit of restarting a firm. So I had a firm since 1990. My partner had founded a firm called Fox & Fowl, and we had a chance to restart when he joined our firm in 2003. And we had to go out and rent new space. And we decided that 72 people was the maximum number of people we ever wanted to employ at one time. That was enough to do very, very large scale projects, and not so big that you wouldn't know people's names on a good day. And so we actually built 72 desks and made a commitment not to hire more than 72 people. And that's how Terrapin came about, because we were getting asked to do more work than we could do. Right now, we're rebuilding from the recession, and we're up into the 60s right now. The recession was really painful for all of us who had work that was being built by people who borrowed the money to build it. It's a very, very tough time.
Okay, we got time for one more question.
I was curious how you do research and how you capture that research and spread it in the firm, and how you account for that research in terms of your projects. Do you bill it? Does everybody have a certain amount of time in a week that, you know, it's explore what you like? That's sort of the Google model. So how do you think about research and capturing it and spreading it?
In Terrapin, there's a high proportion of the work hours that are research related, because
Yes.
that's where the expertise comes from, why we get hired to consult with people. So there's a high component of research. The white paper, the biophilic white paper, that was just in-house funded. We're also working on something with the architecture firm and with Terrapin on how to green up landmark projects. That's funded by Municipal Art Society and the Landmarks Preservation Commission right now. So that provided us a little bit of funding. And we're actually out asking for some of the people who would benefit by this knowledge base to donate to the not-for-profit, to the Municipal Art Society, to continue that research. So some of it, and then some of it is paid for by clients. So in Terrapin, National Geographic hired us to do research on algae energy production. So we did a good deal of work and research on algal development. And ultimately resulted in an article that National Geographic published. So how we handled it was really starting Terrapin. In an architecture firm, it's extremely difficult because it's non-productive hours. And there's really no way to account for it. It's really a much more fluid process when you're thinking and designing and you're trying to do research. We found it almost impossible to document it, or even to get architects to really fill out their timesheets accurately. So we gave up even trying to do it in the architecture firm.